Hello and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts from the What's the Story team on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. And to help us do just that, we get the privilege to chat with amazing guests and delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they have learned along the way. Now, if you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter on our website, which is whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes, and they all get delivered straight to your inbox. And the best part, it's absolutely free. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church. We understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's where Crowd Church steps in, providing a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you are new to the Christian faith or are in search of a new church family, we invite you to visit us at www.crowd.church. And if you've got any questions, just drop us an email at hello@crowd.church. We're here to help and would genuinely love to connect with you. And now, without further ado, let's meet your host and our very special guest for today.
I'm Anna Kettle. Today I am joined by the lovely Jessica Weeks, who's a good friend of mine, and our guest interview for today. Jessica Weeks is the founder of Hannah's House, which is a charity based in the West Midlands that provides refuge for families who've experienced any kind of baby loss. Jess and her husband Andrew set up the charity after the death of their own baby daughter Emelia in 2017, which happened when their eldest daughter Hannah was only 2. Since then, they've also experienced further miscarriages and have added 2 further boys to their family. Jessica's story is an amazing one of triumph over grief, and it's been featured in national magazines and local media alike, and her charity work for Hannah's House has also received awards and recognition by professional organisations such as Ladies First Professional Development and Women Who. Those of you who already know my story know that pregnancy loss is also a subject that's very close to my own heart too, as a fellow baby loss mum. So I'm really excited to have Jessica on the show today and to be talking to her, and I hope you're going to be inspired by this conversation too. So Jess, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being on today.
Hi Anna, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm excited about this conversation. So I guess probably we should start from the beginning of your story, which is sort of the beginning of your sort of journey of faith and how you became a Christian, or when did it become real to you, and sort of start there and then work on through. So tell us a little bit about your journey into faith then. How did that all work for you?
Well, I grew up in a Christian household, in a Christian family, extended family, my grandparents. Jesus and the church has always been the forefront in our family. I remember being quite young when I made a commitment to live for Jesus. And life was good. And then I came to Coventry in 2000 to come to university. And it was the start of a period of making some really poor life decisions. I completely backslid, had various inappropriate relationships. I actually got to a point where I thought I just can't go on like this anymore, and I just had a couple of years where I just focused on friends and family, and it was going really well in that time. And I became friends with a colleague. We were friends for quite a few years before he asked me on a first date, and we were and things moved pretty quickly afterwards. We bought a house after 9 months, and we were living together, and we were also drinking quite a lot and had a real party lifestyle. We earned quite a lot of money. We're both engineers. And then I was doing consultation for a project. And I saw some people from a local church doing outreach, and I was quite drawn to them. And a lady just came to talk to me when I was on a break. I was actually having a cigarette. I was on a cigarette break. She was just chatting, and she invited me to church the next day. And my husband was actually away. Well, he wasn't my husband then. He was away with the car, and kind of just laid in bed in the morning by myself. And I kind of just got up and ran to church. And I met with the Holy Spirit there. And kind of the rest day. So that was the February just before my 30th birthday. So I was 29. And I didn't really look back after that, and things very quickly started to fall in place. And Andy and I got married. I started Bible college, and the Holy Spirit really unpicked and made right some of the bad decisions that I had made. And we were married in 2012, and we went on our honeymoon in 2013 to America, where my brother-in-law lives, that he met his beautiful wife there. So we travelled to the east coast of America for about 3 weeks. And on our way home, I didn't know then, but I had the start of my first miscarriage. And so that was really the first time that I realised that it wasn't God's best to lose a child. That's not what he wanted. But also in the grief and in the loss, he's very real, and he's a real comfort. And I kind of understood what that expression extravagant love means. I really felt that peace, amongst all of our pain. We hadn't really kind of thought about it. We kind of thought, maybe we'll stop using contraception, was just kind of see what happens. And so it came and went really quicker than I had time to process for. And then it seemed to take an age to get pregnant again. I mean, I really understand that now. It wasn't a long time, but for those 7-8 months, I think it was, I started to get a little bit obsessed. Like every month, it's not happening. Why me? All of those questions that can come to mind.
Yeah, and like you say, even though it doesn't seem like a super long time looking back, when you're in the middle of it, and I don't know, I think often we think, oh, I want to get pregnant now, so I'll have contraception just happen right away, right?
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't, you're like, but that's, it's not following my plan. Like it is, it's alarming, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm not making light, 7 or 8 months is quite a long time to wait, and it can be quite anxious, but yeah, I think it can really challenge your sort of sense of control, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your own timescales and life.
Yeah. And I think every month I would say, all right, Lord, I'm handing it over to you, and I am being in that place of peace, but actually still, thinking about it and checking all the signs and checking my cycle and the hormone, like looking for indications. But Andy was actually working away in Bristol, so he would go on a Monday morning, come back Friday night. And so I was really excited for his opportunity, also a little bit irritated with him that he was hampering our efforts. And actually, when I was actually pregnant, I just didn't realise. And I remember one morning he was going to Bristol. I actually physically held onto the lapel of his blazer, and I was like, don't go. He was like, Jess, what are you doing? I've got to go. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The neighbours are starting to look, you wailing like a banshee on the front door. And then I was kind of getting ready for work, and I was just like, just can't. So I called my boss. I said, I don't feel well. I'm just not coming in today. He said, okay. Yeah. And I just didn't feel right, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. So I was like, right. And I think I spoke to my mum. She was like, let's go to your doctor's appointment, get some blood tests. And I went, and I saw the doctor, and she said, all the normal questions, when was your last period? And I was like, oh, don't have a clue. So I checked, and it was actually about 8 weeks ago. And I was like, oh, about 8 weeks ago. She's like, okay, well, we'll do a blood test. We'll do a pregnancy test. And I was like, oh. And then she did it, and then she went out of the room, and then she came back again, and then she called someone. I was like, oh, it's a bit weird. And then she said, so I'm really happy, I think, to tell you that you're pregnant. I said, really, but she, because my cycle had been a bit all over the place, she said, I'm just going to send you to the hospital just so we can determine exactly where you are. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so I kind of just, because Andy had the car, so I got on the bus to the hospital, sitting there thinking, is this actually real? And it was, and I saw a tiny little heartbeat. I was about 9 weeks pregnant, and so it was the longest 3 days to wait for Andy to come home. And so that was really, there was really, I really felt God's peace through that pregnancy. And I had been studying about Hannah and how she had been praying for a baby, for Samuel, and how she promised to sow him. And someone reminded me of that actually last Baby Loss Awareness Week about the name Hannah and what she did, and sowing her child, and making that commitment to the Lord. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, but it's really prevalent in the story now of our lives and our journey to parenting. And so I knew, I was fairly sure in my spirit that she was a girl, and I knew that she would be called Hannah. But I just awaited. So I had a few little pink clothes stashed away because we didn't find out. And she was a girl, and she flew into the world, had a few complications during the delivery. And that's how she lives her life. She is a force to be reckoned with. She is...
How old is she now?
She's 8.5 now. And she's an absolute blessing. So she's my Hannah Lily, and she's beautiful. And so we had, I had a wonderful maternity with her. Her first year was just beautiful. I went back to work part-time. We were enjoying life. Then we decided we'd like to try for another baby. And because of how long it took us to get pregnant with Hannah, I thought, okay, I steadied myself for a long journey, and 2 weeks later I was pregnant. I was like, oh. And
all the best laid plans and everything,
absolutely.
isn't it?
And I was, and I kind of, again, I felt a little bit, something not quite right, but we were doing some building work. And I said to Andy, I said, I don't feel quite right. And I was up a ladder, smashing down a brick wall. And Andy said, do you think maybe you should just check and, make sure everything's all right before you carry on doing all of this physical work? I went, all right. Just popped to Asda. And I was just like, Hannah was playing downstairs and all of the dust. And I did a pregnancy test and it was positive. And I was like, oh, okay. So I came down. I was just sat around in shock for just hours. We didn't kind of, it didn't really sink in. And then we just, and then I kind of suddenly start thinking, we've just literally torn our house apart. We're going to have a baby. Is this going to be finished? All of those things that you might start running away with. And so we went away with some friends and we told them, and we were having a great time. And we had our 12-week scan, and the sonographer said, I can't quite see what I want to, come back in a couple of weeks. And actually Andy was working away again, and so couldn't be at the second scan, but I had my pastor with me, and we were just so busy talking, I didn't really notice that the sonographer had gone so quiet. And she said, I'm just going to take you into another room, I just want to check some things through. And so when I was pregnant with Hannah, my father-in-law died, and I have come to learn now, when the NHS take you to another room and give you a cup of tea, it's not good news.
Never good news, no.
And so she said that she didn't see what she wanted to see in the development time for baby, that the substantial part of her skull was missing, and that she was going to refer us to fetal medicine. And I said, okay. And I actually didn't really feel worried. I don't think I really kind of took on the enormity, and my pastor was really peaceful. And we said, okay. Waited for Andy to come back the next day. And actually it took like nearly a week for that referral to come through. So you're kind of told that something wasn't right and then left in limbo. It's something that I'm campaigning for a little bit at the moment, for some policy changes and how that pathway care takes place. But so we met a consultant when our hospital appointment came through, and Andy did, and she did an extensive scan of baby of Emelia, and she confirmed that she had 2 neural tube defects, which is anencephaly. So that's the skull doesn't form properly, and she actually had 2 breaks in her spine, spina bifida, and they said, that she is incompatible with life, and the best course of treatment would be a termination. And in that instant, the only thing that I did know, there was like my mind was racing in 100 miles a minute, that I couldn't have a termination. And he was very worried about me. We were very kind of at different places, but I knew that I couldn't. So we left the hospital. We went straight to church. My pastor, she was making a cup of tea, and I just burst into tears. I hadn't said anything or kind of reacted at all. And so she went to get her husband, she went to get my pastor, and we all sat and cried. And he said, he's just the most amazing spiritual father. He said, just at some point, you're going to have to decide what you're believing for and decide what you want to do. I was, what does he mean? They've just told me my baby's going to die. And yeah, actually, he said, you got to believe in that rhema word of, and seek the Lord. And I said, okay. So the next day it came, and I was sat, sobbing in the spare bedroom. And the verse that God gave me was in Psalms 118, where it says, I will not die but live and proclaim the word of the Lord. And so that's the verse that I stood on, really, for the whole of the pregnancy. And we had, Anna, we had so many kind of ups and downs. And that's, that's kind of maybe the first 9 years of, walking again with the Lord. But yeah, he's just been so absolutely wonderful. So.
But that's, as you say, like real ups and downs. And, obviously, like miscarriage is, one thing, but then, that kind of news is like, such a life-changing situation, isn't it? And to me, I just think, I don't know, it's just, I guess I'm interested in like kind of how you find God in the middle of that, because, you like talk about that rhema word, but obviously it must have been a really anxious time and a really stressful time for you as well. Like trying to stand on God's word and trust him with the outcome, but also like, how does that look in practice, right? Because you've got 9 months of pregnancy, or not quite 9 months by the time you found out, but a large chunk of pregnancy is like months and months of your life where you're just thinking, what's going to happen? And, how does that impact you? And, how does it change the shape of your faith? Or like, how did you find God in the middle of that?
Honestly, I don't think I've ever felt so close to him. He was never, like I felt like he was a real tangible presence during that pregnancy. And out of the 4 babies that I've given birth to, she was the best. It was the best pregnancy. Like, apart from one point of being really unwell before the diagnosis, I was sent home from work. I didn't have any symptoms. I was really well. I was fit and well. Like, we were walking the hills when I was 8 months pregnant. I was out in the Yorkshire Dales having a great time. I will say that we didn't tell a lot of people about the diagnosis. We had some insensitive words, I think, from people who did know, didn't understand it. Changed a lot of relationships. Our circle's definitely a lot smaller now. We spent a lot of time just being with our families. Like our mums, I just don't know what we'd have done without them. But she, they said a lot of things, and there were, whether you believe in tangible miracles still or not, a lot of things took place during her pregnancy. So there were 2 breaks in her spine, but by the time that she was born, there was none. The substantial part of her intestines were outside of the stomach wall, but when she was born, it was perfect. So, there was
Yeah, some really physical,
Yeah,
tangible
absolutely.
changes. Yeah.
Which the doctors kind of acknowledged but glossed over, and
Yeah.
I wasn't in a fit state to challenge them over it, but I believe that God watched over his word to perform it, because he said that she would live. And, she did die, but she is in heaven and she is perfect.
But God was God was faithful to that promise, and that she did
Yeah,
live,
she
though,
did.
and you were told she would never
Yeah,
be born
absolutely.
alive, weren't you?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about sort of how the next part of the story
Yeah,
then?
so
Obviously
we continued
birth and
with the pregnancy, and it was great. We kept kind of going. I think I went in every month or so for scans, and every time something changed a little bit. But she honestly must be the most photographed baby. But we had so many pictures of her, and I built a really good relationship with my consultant, with my obstetrician. She was amazing. She still is. We're still in contact with her. And she delivered my eldest son as well. So we've been on a journey with her, and she came to appreciate our decisions. I know she didn't agree with them, first of all. But she did live, and she made all your normal, baby snuffling noises, and she didn't cry. But I mean, she was all still kind of all snuggled up, and I was holding her still, because I had a C-section, and then I gave her to Andy, and she opened her eyes. I was like, "Excuse me, I'm the one who's gone through all of this." I'm actually still open on the upper and eighth in theatre, but she opened her eyes to look at her daddy, and was exactly what he needed. He needed that, because obviously I carried her, and I felt her every move and her every turn and kick, and she was very strong. I mean, I'm 5'8", and probably got like a 33 inside leg. I've got really long legs, and all of our children have got really long legs. And I thought the boys were actually going to break my ribs when I was pregnant with them. But she had the longest legs, and considering that she had the substantial part of her skull missing, she was a little chunky thing. She had some big old little cheeks like these, and she had my big brown eyes, and she had her daddy's dimples that all four of them had. And so we had a really beautiful moment after her birth. And so she lived for 57 minutes. She got to have kisses and cuddles with both her grandmas. And then she went home to heaven, into the arms of Jesus. And so we had a cuddle cot. So she was actually we could physically keep her with us for a little while. I stayed in hospital for a couple of days, and I don't necessarily remember a lot straight after she died. You have quite a lot of things. So they gave me things to stop my milk coming in. I think I had quite a lot of liquid morphine to stop the pain, but I think also it was a little bit like a sedation. And so Andy went home in the evening after she died. My pastor came in and sat with me. We just chatted. And I still felt really loved. And then the next morning, she had gone to the chapel of rest, and it was a change of shift, and Andy wasn't here yet. And I tried to call, and they'd said, if you want to go home today, you have to have a wee. You have to take the catheter out. I was okay. So I was just, sitting on the toilet, and I couldn't have a wee, and I couldn't speak to anyone, and it was just, I was like, Lord, I just feel so alone. And then I just heard this lovely Irish lilt saying, "Hey Jess, it's just me." And it was my community midwife who'd come in to see me before her shift, before she went out. And I just seen on the toilet crying. I was like, "Oh, Maddie, I can't wait." And she's like, "It's all right." And she stayed with me until the midwives kind of came on, until they did. And so, God really put people in place to support me throughout it all.
Just in really little practical ways.
Absolutely. And the peace of God never left me. So that same midwife, she came to see me long after I was discharged. And she said, "Every time I come here, you were laughing and eating." I said, "I'm so hungry." And I've never felt so hungry, but I had a real supernatural quick healing. I was up and about looking after Hannah. I mean, there were days when all I could do was kind of open the curtains and brush my hair. But there's also days when, you know, I laughed, and I just, on the day that I came home, I was determined to get home in time to put Hannah to bed. And my pastor was here dropping off some food. So my mum was here with Hannah. So I had my spiritual mum and my actual mum. And I really feel, again, that was like another little kiss from God, just to, like, you know, to be welcomed home by your mums. It was real. It's something that I recall quite a lot to think about. And so, yeah, there were real lovely moments. And I think because she had such unusual symptoms, her postmortem took quite a long time. She had to go to Birmingham. And so we waited nearly a month for her funeral. And I do remember on the run up to that I'd kind of had enough. I was like, enough now. I want to get off. I'm a civil engineer. I'm practical. You know, you go through the process, but you know, we know that grief is not logical. Absolutely not logical.
It's not a linear process
at all. It's completely emotional. And so, in fact, on the night before her funeral, I said to my sister, I was going through this process, and like, you know, well, these are things, Hannah's things for the nursery and the dog's food. She was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "No, I'm not doing it now. I'm just going." She's like, "Okay, you can't actually leave." But she was just, she was great. Just the things she could say, the things that sisters could say, like, "Oh, you know, it's so good today." I was like, "Okay, thanks."
Yeah.
I do remember her like sitting, like brushing my hair and like doing my makeup, and just those little things that I couldn't necessarily muster up to do for myself.
Yeah.
But I was really bothered by the fact that I was never going to get to put Emelia to bed. Sing to Hannah. I love to sing. I was part of the worship team at church, and I used to sing Hannah. I sing the boys to sleep most nights. So I went to the funeral, and I sat with her in her coffin, and I sang to her, and I felt like I kind of got a download. I didn't know it then, but it was kind of the founding objectives for Hannah's house. And the verse that I spoke at her funeral, I was determined that she was my baby and I was going to talk about her. But the verse that God gave me was in Lamentations, where it says this: "I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. Through the Lord's mercies we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should hope and wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord." And that's what I shared. And there's one translation that says, "And yet I still dare to hope." And as
I love that.
Yeah, and as my healing journey kind of unfolded, that dare to hope is now the tagline of Hannah's house, because then we got on with getting on with life and that healing thing. And I went, so she died in January, and I went back to work in the August, and my friend was my line manager at the time. She's not anymore, but I mean, I think I was fairly ineffective for the first few months. But she was just an absolute blessing. She got round everybody and managed to, you know, tell everybody. And I had a series of counselling through work, like 12 weeks, and I felt like we were doing all right. And then towards the end of the year, we decided that we were going to try again. So around the October time, we had another early miscarriage. And I felt very broken in heart, and I was like, okay. I felt really sad, and you know, we dealt with it. And then Christmas came, and we thought we'd try again. And then I had another miscarriage, and I just actually refused to acknowledge it. Just, in fact, my boss, we were making coffee one day between meetings, and she said, "You all right?" I said, "Oh, I had miscarriage last week," and just carried on making the tea. And she was like,
And do you feel like that was because almost you've been through so much loss and grief already that it was like, oh, it's just more of the same? Or was it just like
yeah.
you got to a point where you were like, I just can't take
I
anymore?
think that was it. I was like, I just can't, I can't deal with it. Like, I know God is a good God, and I know that he has done so much for us already. And living out that gospel and believing it, even though it's not what you're seeing now, and waiting for that manifestation, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to walk out when you're in the midst of that trial. And I feel like, now I've kind of reflected, maybe only in the last 12 to 18 months on those 2 little babies that I lost between Emelia and the boys. Because I just think I just didn't want to deal with it. But it was actually after Dan was born, after my oldest son was born, and he was, it was lovely. It was a planned C-section. We went in, I was a bit early. We had team toast. We were joking with all the nurses because by that time I'd been in the hospital a lot. And we knew them all, and people were popping in, oh, you're back again, and it was nice. And and Hannah was a bit freaked out when she came in, so my mum came and we sat. They moved me to a side room. We had dinner, had lovely food. It was just, it was a really wonderful experience. I for sure had postnatal depression after him. I couldn't really it was just something that was, so we took him on his first holiday, and that realization that I never got to take Emelia on his first holiday. And we bought his first baby shoes because they are the cutest things ever. And she never got to have baby shoes.
And I guess it does bring up all of those kind of baby first and different scenarios that kind of bring back up grief again. This is like, as you say, like grief's not linear. So you think you've dealt with something and you're sort of healed, but then certainly that was my experience as well. It's like not linear, and then something comes up and you're like, oh, it's this again. I thought I dealt with this, but here it is again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not surprised that having another child after that kind of loss brings up stuff again.
And so I felt like then, I had been blessed. God had given us this beautiful little boy, and he's called Daniel Isaac because Isaac, it means a man of excellence, but Isaac means to laugh, because I think at that point everybody needed a laugh. And my mum had been through cancer, my father-in-law had died, and then my granny had died, and then Andy's granny had died, and then
it's a lot of
we'd had
death,
2 miscarriages.
And
then we had this beautiful boy. But whilst I was pregnant with him, Andy turned 40, and he decided that he was going to retrain as an electrician and start our own company. It was the best thing that we ever did. And my mum said, I've got my son-in-law back, because he was, gone for 12 hours a day. And so all of these things kind of happened at like we were going at a pace of life, and had this toddler. I was back at work. I loved my job, but it was still quite, demanding. Even though I was doing 4 days work in 3.5 days, so I had those days off with Han, and then went back to work with Daniel, and then the world stopped. COVID hit, and I had some time to think, and I was like, no, thank you, Lord. I've dealt with that. It's done. Packed it away in a little box. And the Holy Spirit is very gentle.
Yeah.
And you don't listen. And then, for me, he always brings people alongside to confirm what he's saying to me. And so my friend who runs a charity, a bereavement charity, she lost a little boy at 12 months in a car accident. She said, she rang me one evening and said, actually, first of all, we were having one of those long, lingering dinners because there was nothing else to do, and just chatting. And so Dan was probably about 19 months. And Han just said, Mummy, I really wish that I wish that Emelia was here so I could play with her. And I said, oh, me too. And I excused myself on the table and collapsed in a heap on my bedroom floor. and the pain was just, when people say I've got a broken heart, I know what that feels like. And that feeling was of after she just died, of rearing its ugly head again. And I was like, no. And at that point, Charlotte rang and she said, oh, I've got 12 hours pro bono counselling. And when I was at your point in my grief journey, I could really have done with this help, and I thought you'd find it really helpful. And I was so rude to her, and I told her to go away, no uncertain terms. At which point Andy popped his head around the corner and said, who are you on the phone to? And I told him what she said, and he said, do you think maybe you should ring her back? No, I don't think nothing wrong with me. I went to bed and didn't sleep and tossed and turned, and I rang her in the morning and I said, probably do need that help. And that was the beginning of me being in a position on my own healing to then start to be able to help everybody else. And so with that 12 weeks and 3 months, it so happened that I was at home. And so we were, I was able to, do my job, toddler around my feet, and then do my counselling once a week. I really began to unpick all of that painful hurt that I had locked away in a little box. And my counsellor at the end of my session said, you'd make a really good counsellor. I said, I don't think I would. And I think within that week, 3 people said it to me, and I said, all right, I hear you, Lord.
Maybe there's something
there's something about it. And so, but in the background, I'd really been trying to do a lot of things with Hannah's House, like to get the charitable status. I've been doing a lot of work at the hospital, like setting up different groups, and it was just like walking through treacle. It just wasn't working. But I really believe it's because I was in no fit state to help anybody. And then I went back to Bible college to start my level 2, and it literally happened. It was a Saturday morning, and because we still weren't allowed to be in church, I was in this very room doing my first online lecture. An email pinged in from the Charities Commission. You have your charitable status. I was like, my goodness. So that was the February. Just the month before my 39th birthday. And, that was amazing. So we'd done all of this work and got this charitable status. So you can, when you're setting up a charity, do, quite a lot. But to me, it didn't feel right when you're working with people's hearts that you should have that kind of level of standing to show you've got merit, you've been through those checks. So I started to do that, and I'd already kind of spoken informally to a couple of people about being trustees. And so that was February 21, and started to have our first few meetings. And then I made a decision then that after, so Dan was 3, he was going to be 3 that year, that we tried and tried for that, that next baby. I knew I always wanted 3 babies to have with me on earth. And I was like, well, maybe if that's, I've got 1 in heaven and 2 with me here, then I am still so blessed. And I said well, no, I said, let's just call it. I said, I'm 40 next month. I'm 40 in a few weeks. Let's just leave it. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah, let's just, we'll call it quits, and we'll be happy with our lot. Little did I know that I was probably already pregnant. And so I was at Bible college on the Saturday. It was my actual birthday, and they kind of got me a cake at break, and I was in absolute floods of tears. I was like, oh, that's nice, very emotional. And then I got home and I had a surprise party, and we'd had some champagne, we'd had cocktails. The next day I felt so unwell, and I was like, this is really well. And Andy said, well, it's 40. If you drink champagne at 40, that's what happens. I said, okay. And then like a few weeks later, I still felt really rough. But we were just like, life was at a pace with establishing a business. I just didn't even think about it. And then I just suddenly thought, I was out with my friend, so she did my afternoon tea because we still couldn't meet anywhere. And she had a perfume on. I was like, and I was like, that is disgusting. that smell. And I was like, and I was driving home, so because she lives in Chesterfield, so we'd met halfway, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why would something normal make me feel so sick? I was like, Jessica, you've been here before. I was like, no, I'm 40.
And then it starts to dawn on you.
Yeah, so I stopped. I got a pregnancy test, and I came home, did a pregnancy test, and I was pregnant. I was 40 and I was pregnant. And I think that's what I said for 9 months, but I'm 40 and I'm pregnant. But it was not a straightforward pregnancy. So the 20-week scan, they saw that baby was very, very small, between the first and second percentile. And my other babies had been quite big. Even Emelia was, quite big. Dan was like on the 90th percentile. So they're like, okay. So they were doing a lot of monitoring, and I was getting more and more anxious, and I was really fighting to stay peaceful. And then it came to an head that they were monitoring the flow in my umbilical cord, but they could see that it was an intermittent beat. So like out of 8-10 beats, he was only getting like 8 of them. So like his oxygen levels weren't good. He wasn't getting the nutrients. They're like, right, well, you've got to stay here. I was like, when you stay in hospitals, babies die. And I've got 2 children at home. So I was like, no, I'm going. I said, come on, Mum, we're going. She said, do you think you should stay? And I said, no, Andy. I can't remember where it was. I think it was Derby somewhere. There's no reception in the hospital. So I got outside and I rang him. And that's when I heard his voice. I burst into tears. And he said, well, do you think maybe you should stay? I said, no, I'm going to go and get, but actually in my mind, I was really just thinking about Hannah, because, Mum going to hospital it's not always a good thing. That she was at school by this point. We had a toddler, and I just thought, if she comes home and I'm not there, so I said to them, right. So I went back in and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home. I'm going to get a bag. I'm going to pick my children up. I'm going to sort everything out, and then I'll come back in. They said, okay. They got a bed for me on the antenatal ward. But I didn't know that was the start of a really long journey. So I got home. They just, sat with Han, and I plaited her hair. And, God just orchestrates things. So my friend, the same friend who I'd been with when I thought I might be pregnant, said, just I'd really like to see you. Can I come stay? Because we didn't work Fridays. I was like, yeah, come down. I'll be home at this time. We just got a hospital appointment. So she was there before me, and Andy had got home. So I went to get Hannah from school. And I said, can you look after my children? She went, yes. So she was there. She came for a night. And it just I didn't get to see her at all, but she looked after the children. So anyway, I was going for I was having monitoring baby 3 times a day. So I'd stayed then that night. And then they did every time you move from the hospital, you had to have a COVID test. They all doing fine. And then they sent one away. So I've probably been in about 36 hours, and they came and they said, you've tested positive for COVID. I was like,
oh no.
I said, that's nice. Can I go home? They're like, no. I said, so I was incarcerated in a side room, couldn't leave. I had to go for a scan. I had a scan booked in 48 hours.
That is just not what you need on top of everything else, during a pregnancy.
And I felt like such a fraud because I had no symptoms. I was really very well. Yeah. There was on the antenatal ward, all the side rooms, there were really poorly, really sick mums. And I was like, kept ringing out, can I have a cup of tea, please? But I'm really thankful for what happened. So I went, there was no protocol of if I went home, how I could come back into the hospital with COVID. They just, I just had to stay. So I was there for 6 days.
Because presumably this was before vaccines or any of that
part. You could still have the vaccine. No, I think halfway through. So what was that? That was mid-21. So the vaccine. So the world were kind of open, but not quite. Yeah, hospital was still very much, you could only the father could come onto an antenatal ward, no children and anything like that. So so they finally let me. I had my scan, and he was really small, and they said okay, and I think I really believe that if I hadn't had tested positive COVID, they would have delivered him there and then. So I was about 30 weeks at this point. So I went home at 31 weeks, and I was still kind of coming in. I was still at work because, I was 31 weeks pregnant. I did my handover from a hospital bed. I wrote my handover note. I was doing all of those things, and then it was, I was still doing all this stuff with Hannah's House. I'd planned to do this big launch in Baby Loss Awareness Week in the October. So this was kind of the end of September, and he was due in December. And then, so we made a plan that I would go home. That was on the Friday. I did my handover on Friday morning. I went in to hospital to see a consultant, and I was due to go back in on Sunday. So went in for another scan on the Saturday, went back in Sunday night, had a beautiful midwife, and she was like, "Do you know why you're here?" I burst into tears. I said, "They can deliver baby. He's too small." I didn't, we didn't even know what his prognosis was. Like, was he going to live? Like, he was perfectly formed. He was just small.
Yeah.
And I just, she said, "Right," stopped everything. She was amazing. It was like 9:00 on a Sunday night. She managed to get the head of neonates down to talk to us. She had an anaesthetist in to come and talk to us and tell about what would happen to baby, like when it was going to be delivered. And so then they started this transfusion, which can't even remember what it's called, something sulfate, but it's to protect his brain in case he was like delivered like in the middle of the night because he was so small. But it makes you feel very hot, like your head's really hot. And like, so she said it might give you some really unfortunate symptoms. I was like, "No, I'm fine. After about 20 minutes, Andy was like, "You're right." I said, "It's not a good feeling." But in the middle of all that, I had this knock on the door. It was a voice that said, "Oh, hi, it's only me." And it was my midwife who had taken care of, who had delivered Emelia. And I haven't seen her since then. Like, I'd texted her a few times. And so she came and she sat and she cried with us. We showed her the pictures of Hannah being grown up in Dan. And so I was at peace then. And so, like, I was on the labour ward because I'd had to have this thing. And it was very loud, and I don't think I really slept. And then Andy came back in the morning and I was being monitored. So I kind of knew that I was just going to be there until he was going to be delivered. And then we had this lovely consultant who just kind of kept coming in and out. But baby was starting to struggle. So his heart rate was dipping, and then he was struggling to get it back up. And she came in just before lunch, and she looked at me. And when you get that feeling, and she just didn't look right. And she went out, she made a phone call, she came back in, and she was getting whiter and whiter. And I was like, "It's not good." And like 20 minutes later, the registrar came in. She was like, "Right," and she's looking at the notes. She was like, "Right, okay, we're going to theatre." And I was like, "Okay, like later." She said, "No, now." I said, "Okay." And he was born maybe an hour later, and he came out with a roar. He was about 20 centimetres. He was just under 1 kilogram, so just under 2 pounds. And he is a little fire. He spent a couple of hours in neonates HDU, in intensive care, and then he was in HDU. And I don't know how they did it. They managed to get my hospital bed into the neonates intensive care. So Andy had seen him, but I hadn't seen him. And so, again, I was eating tea and toast.
Something
in intensive care. And I looked at him, I was like, he's just so small, so small. And I just had all of these beautiful people taking care of me. I had this midwife who stayed with me, trying to get the milk expressed. And then I kind of started to get tired. So they took me up to the ward. And then I woke up at 6:00 the next morning, and they wheeled me down. And I'd had my breakfast, and I was trying to express the milk, and it wasn't working. And then I got upstairs, and I had a massive hemorrhage. And to pull the emergency cord, I lost loads of blood. And I think they gave me some painkillers. I think they might have given me some liquid morphine. And I woke up 12 hours later, and Andy was there, and he was like, I don't think we might need some milk for baby. So I hadn't seen him then for like nearly the rest of the day. So we managed to go down after dinner.
But he was absolutely fine.
He was fine by the time we got down to him.
Small.
He was still in HDU. He was just small. So they call it growing and feeding, which is what he was doing. So then started off like he had to have a little line sewn into his foot, and that is actually the only evidence that he was ever in neonates. He's got a tiny little scar. So
yeah, amazing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I just kind of like think through like all of your story, and you know, gosh, what a roller coaster, ups and downs, you know, through having your family. Just like the highs and lows. But one thing that strikes me through it is just that there's this kind of like just knowing God's presence and like looking after you through all of it.
Absolutely.
But I just wondered, like, kind of what's that kind of, if you could distill it down to one thing, what's the kind of, what's sort of standout lesson or thing that you've learned through all of it? What's kind of like, if you could just distill it down to one thing, what would that be? Like what kind of, what have you learned through all of it, you know, through all of the ups and downs of grief and loss, and also like, you know, the babies that, you know, were born healthy as well, you know, the family you have got, like what's the kind of, life motto, I guess, or lesson that you kind of would take away from all of that, if you could?
I think God always answers prayers, but it doesn't come like as we would want or as we would expect. And you know, he says, you know, it says in Romans that all things work together for the good for those who are called according to his purpose. And I think I would never have chosen for Emelia to die, ever.
Yeah,
never ever.
Of course.
But so much good has come from her life, so much purpose, and she still lives and breathes. And someone pointed out to me that actually she lived a life of love in this fallen world where there was so much hurt, that all she knew on this earth was love and kisses. And I think that's beautiful for me. I really like that. It really carries me on the days when I remember, you know, think, because although I know if she had a choice to come back and be with us, you know, why would you choose that when you've got heaven in all of its perfection? But it doesn't miss that I am wholly aware that she's missing from me. And I know it is a time, you know, eternity is going to be amazing to be with her and the other three babies. But I think that it would be to get up again, that you have already lived the worst day you thought you were ever going to encounter. And that there is the pain of being separated from your loved one, from your baby. But there is, I think it's a worse pain to not heal from it and to live that life with pain that you can heal from. But it also hurts. It hurts to deal with the fact that you trusted God and you were expecting a prayer to be answered, or that you were waiting for the manifestation of your family to come and it hasn't come this side of heaven. That is also painful, but he has a peace and you can walk in that peace and let go of the grief. I think sometimes, so, you know, when my father-in-law died, we have wonderful memories of him. But when you lose a baby, you don't have those memories. You have the dreams and the hopes that you think have died. And it is definitely a decision to heal from them. It is definitely a decision to trust God. And, you know, if you've been standing and believing, that trust can be shaken. And I think, you know, all of the well-meaning, loving, Christ-centered friends can tell you all of what the gospel says. But until you come to that place of that revelation for yourself, and I think that's when people like you and me who have walked it can come alongside and say, it's going to take as long as it takes. But
that's also what I love about your story, is that like it strikes me that God wasn't willing to just leave you like half healed or semi healed or a bit healed. Like,
absolutely.
I love that part of your story where you talked about the fact that like God was like, we're not, you haven't sorted this out properly yet. Like your
absolutely.
grief is still affecting you. And like, just that to me, that just really speaks of how God wanted to heal you and make you whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was part of that healing process, but meant that you were so much more equipped to then serve other women that are in this space. And, you know, everything you're doing with Hannah's House charity now and supporting other grieving families, you know, that's possible because, you know, God cared too much to leave you half healed or partially healed. And I know you would probably say, oh, you know, it's still a journey.
It is.
You know,
it's
some
definitely
days,
progressive, isn't it?
You know, grief's still there, of course, because it never fully heals the side of heaven. But I love the fact that, like, yeah, God doesn't do a half-baked job. And that's really clear in your story. And that whole kind of, what was the strap line you said for Hannah's Hope again?
It's dare to hope. Dare to hope.
Dare to hope.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, dare to hope that, you know, something good can come out of the worst situations.
There is hope, to begin. But baby loss is not the end of your story, is it? It's not the end.
That's right.
And so when you don't have that memories, the pain can be sometimes the only thing you associate with your baby. And so I know that it's really painful to let go of that. I'd remember, you know, it was probably summer, like the sun was shining and I had dropped Hannah at nursery and I dropped her at nursery and it's like opposite a beautiful park and I'd been for a run. I got in a car and I put the radio on and I was singing, pulled up outside the house and I was feeling really happy and light and burst into tears because I wasn't in pain and I hadn't thought about her for a couple of hours. And it is that kind of, and I know there are women out there who are hurting, who are going through that battle of, you know, living their lives and not wanting to let go of the pain because it's all they've got. But, you know, Jesus came.
Almost like the memories linked to the pain.
Yeah, Jesus came that we don't have to live in the pain and that we can give it to him. You know, come to me, all those who are heavy burden. I was trying to explain to Dan what a burden was. He was like, well, is it something you carry around? Why don't you just put it down? I was like, but, you know, it's not a physical burden, but it can, it does feel like that. You know, sometimes, you know, if you've like, you feel like it's on your shoulders. Like, you ever seen a person who's depressed and they can't hold their head up, you know? But when we get in the presence of God, you know, all that can be gone. But it is, again, still a surrender. You've still got to make that decision that you can trust him. You can let go of the pain and that it's okay. And there's something better at the end of it.
Yeah. And certainly your family story, you know, clearly such a clear testimony of that. And yeah, I'm just really excited to see what God does with it all next. But
thank you.
I mean, I could talk to you all day, Jessica, honestly, about this. I know we could talk about this forever. But I am aware of time and we're getting to the end of this podcast. But obviously, it would be great to just kind of share with us where people can connect with you more if they connect with your story or want to learn more about Hannah's House, perhaps. Like, it's a wonderful charity, particularly for anyone who's sort of in the West Midlands, Coventry area, kind of where you are. Yeah. And further afield too. But can you just quickly, just tell us where people can find you, find out more, connect with you if they want to, because it's such a wonderful resource.
Thanks, Anna. Well, you can find us at hannahshouse.org.uk or on social media at Hannah's House Cov is our handle, so you can find us there. And we're on LinkedIn too. So, I mean, even if you want to have a little anonymous chat, you can. We've got a chat function on our website, and someone, probably me, will come back to you with some support. So please don't be alone in your pain. Just reach out. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So many fab resources on the website. So do check it out. And even if, you know, it's not something you need personally, you know, it's surprising, you know, most people know somebody who's been affected by pregnancy loss, don't they?
Yeah.
I think it's 1 in 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even if you don't think you do, you probably will meet someone at some point who's affected by this issue, even if it's not you. So I think it's, to be honest, I mean, I'm a big advocate of this too, but I think everybody needs to learn more about this subject and know how to support other people. So yeah, totally recommend that. Jessica, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It's been so lovely to have you on What's the Story. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Anna.
And just like that, we have reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Now remember to check out Crowd Church at www.crowd.church, even if you might not see the point of church. You see, we are a digital church on a quest to discover how Jesus can help us live a more meaningful life. We are a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. And you are welcome at Crowd Church. Don't forget to subscribe to the What's the Story podcast on your favorite podcast app, because we've got a treasure trove of inspiring stories coming your way, and we would basically hate for you to miss any of them. And just in case no one has told you yet today, remember, you are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you have to bear. What's the Story is a production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team, including Anna Kettle, Sadaf Bainon, and me, Matt Edmondson, and Tanya Hutzalak, work behind the scenes tirelessly to bring you all these fabulous stories. Our theme song is a creative work of Josh Edmondson. And if you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. And whilst you're there, sign up for our free weekly newsletter to get all of this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's it from all of us this week here at What's the Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. We'll catch you next time. Bye for now.